Hello and welcome everyone. So this is our amazing town hall. Uh, we have invited the entire membership and we have a good group here that has decided to show up and hang out with us for a little while, see a little bit about what goes on here behind the scenes. Um, so the main thing is that we're taking questions. So we got a few that we'll be working through, but certainly, type into the chat during the time here if you have anything to say. And if we happen to be ignoring you, you might be able to unmute yourself and say, hey, look over here. So, it's intended to be a little bit informal, just kind of here to find out what the members want, and so that we can kind of make sure that we're in tune with what's going on and what the SFPA should be. So we haven't heard from our fearless leader, Brian Tawara. So we know that he kind of, trucks along in his way. So we may or may not see him, but know that that's why we have a group of us here to take care of the business of the SFPA. So typically we meet once a month in just kind of for about an hour or more. Sometimes we usually bleed over a bit. Just to kind of talk about, the upcoming things. Certainly all of our publications and productions tend to eat up a lot of time in terms of, we have people submitting nominations for things, and then we're always shifting to voting on things, and then, it's the end of the year and we've got to do all of that over again. So there's certainly a lot, as you know, that we take care of and get out, but we're always open to additional ideas and seeing where we have the time and capacity to expand and do the sorts of things that bring us into the future. So we can go ahead and leap into some of our first questions. We'd kind of previewed them a little bit amongst us, so we'd be knowing what to say, but we didn't necessarily rehearse any answers. But just kind of starting in with one of them, sometimes we hear a little bit about, we have all of the voting, right? And it tends to kind of, there's a pinch point where it does cluster, where we've got like the Rieslings going on and the Dwarf Stars and the Elgins or Elgins. Who knows how to pronounce that?
Elgin.
Elgin. Okay. So we've got a lot of voting that happens, and is there any opportunity for us to kind of spread that out across the year, or how can we maybe decrease some of the just kind of everything all at the same time? So I don't know who wants to kind of field that one first. Maybe I think Diane had some thoughts on it.
Well, so my feeling is that it's already quite about as spread out as it can be. We start with the Rieslings with the nomination period January 1st, and then we go into voting, which we're doing now, and that closes in June. We start with the Elgins quite early, usually. We started this year March 15th. And then we have quite a long reading period for the Elgin because it's a lot of reading, right? And that closes, when does that close, Jordan? September.
Yeah, voting closes September 15th.
Yeah. And so in the middle there's Dwarf Stars, which is, pretty low key as far as commitment from the membership is concerned. And so that our chair has been fielding nominations. People send in their own poetry, and that work falls mostly to him, to Charles Christian this year. Soon, when is it?
The nominations are closing,
they
today.
Just closed, yeah, right. So and next month, the no, not in July, everybody will be sent the Dwarf Stars anthology. So then there's that voting period is 6 or 8 weeks or so, and then by the end of that quarter we have our winners, and we announce those in the third quarter, and then also the Elgin Award winners are announced in the last star line of the year. The only quarter where there's really nothing happening is between October and December. And
Unless we have Grandmaster balloting.
right, yeah. Then we have Grandmaster stuff, but we don't do that every year.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that's not a huge thing anyway. It's just a matter of fielding nominations and putting up a voting ballot and tallying the votes and then announcing them in January.
Okay.
That happens. So personally, I feel like having that open quarter at the end of the year is a really good thing, because it's just, hello, Jeannie. It's a lot of work behind the scenes that people don't really know about. What the members have to do is pretty condensed, but for the officers and other volunteers, it's quite extended, actually. And we're still producing Starline and Eye to the Telescope in October as well. So, and there's Christmas and New Year's and all of that. So I don't know. I thought maybe we could move the dwarf stars to later on in the year, but I don't know if that would make that much difference. Does anybody have any strong feelings?
We're trying to spread things out so that the Riesling went along with one star line mailing, dwarf stars with the other, and then the Elgin and contest deadlines and winter announcements coincided with the October star line. And I think the idea was that January, immediately following holidays for a lot of people and the end of the year and all that, didn't need to be complicated with anything more than remembering to announce all the deadlines and all the chairs for the year and so forth.
Mm.
We don't,
Yeah,
we don't have to have things coincide with Starline mailings, except that for Riesling and Dwarf Stars, it is infinitely cheaper to mail the print versions along with Starline. So it has to be with some issue of Starline.
Did you have something to say, Deborah? Debbie?
I was just going to say that I think where Dwarf Stars is, having a vested interest in Dwarf Stars, I think it's perfect, because to push it back any further, then it's kind of odd to be talking about poems of the previous year. You know what I mean? I think you're still early enough in the year to be doing that. But I think if you pushed it back, so I think that having it with the two star lines, and we're done with nominating Rieslings. We haven't voted yet, but I feel as a member, I think it works out well. And I think what I was back in the days when I was part of the committee, I also think it works well. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree that I think in terms of the spread that we just have a lot going on, and to some extent that's a good problem to have. I don't think there's anything wrong with a member deciding, okay, this is kind of where I have a little bit more time and focus and energy to be able to, maybe Dwarf Stars is more your passion than kind of the longer forms, or maybe the longer forms is where you see yourself as kind of having a little bit more expertise, right? So like kind of self-selecting where are you going to put your time and effort is one way to be able to handle that too. So I tend to sometimes wonder, okay, well, am I gonna have time to vote on the Riesling? And then I always, in the last few days, manage to read those last few poems and make my selections. But I don't get down on myself if it's if I don't get to vote in one year, it's gonna be okay, I think.
I think maybe whoever had originally sent the question, and I'm looking at Andy Duncan's, comment, there's the nebula ballots. And I know there's the Stoker ballots that all happen in the spring, and it might be that some of the feeling of a heavy load might not just be with the SFPA, but actually with other organizations and their awards and reading for that. But I don't
Yeah.
think we can do much about that.
No, and I think Debbie Kaloji makes a good point that if we push things farther back into the year, it becomes a little odd to be considering stuff in July or October even for 2020. You know, everybody's trying to forget 2020 as it is. So.
It's more
Yeah.
appropriate with the Elgins because that takes so much more reading time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking too at the publication of the Nebula Showcase, and I think that's fairly delayed in terms of like they've kind of got some things that they've reviewed and they've made their awards, and then once they've announced their awards, it's still like another half a year. So they're kind of 2 years behind in terms of creating that publication of here's the best of whatever year. I think they even changed the way that they just say like this is the Nebula Showcase number 47 to kind of, I think, kind of cover up how far behind it is. But
What year it is.
anyway, I think we can go ahead and jump to another question, unless there are any other final things on that. I mean, we could go into the discussion of our announcement here, if Rich wants to do that at this point.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Yes. So the big announcement is that we have put in our paperwork for the 501c3 tax exempt status, and we'll be waiting to find out from the IRS whether it's thumbs up or thumbs down. But I hope to be able to put out word through official channels pretty soon. So that'll be great. Not only will people benefit tax-wise in the US for their donations, but we'll also be able to, in good faith, apply for grants, things like that. So it's kind of a big deal. There's going to be a little bit more paperwork on our side just to make sure that we're towing the line with all the regulations on nonprofits, but it seems like the benefits are going to outweigh that. So we're really happy to we're going to be able to take that plunge after a long time talking about it, and we'll keep you filled in on how that goes. And hopefully, if you've already donated, then we'll also at the end of the year you'll be expecting a little statement on thanking you for your donation, so for your tax records too. So that's my big thing.
Excellent. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting maneuver for us to be kind of going in that direction after long times of investigating and searching and hoping for it. So kudos to Rich and Brian for pushing that through. So moving on to other things, unless we have other final bits on that. So one thing that's kind of come up is about the SFPA's presence at conventions and how we want to kind of help bolster that. Could we have like a kind of a convention coordinator type position as a volunteer role? Or what are other ways that the SFPA can kind of host tables at conventions, and what does that look like? I don't know if there's someone who wants to primarily take that, but so when some people have brought it up, some of the tables are apparently free that you can kind of have little space to kind of collect. And from what I understand, members have kind of been doing some of that kind of stuff and helping to coordinate readings. And so that's always great to know that members are out doing that and kind of taking that initiative. Doesn't necessarily have to have that official SFPA stamp to be, hey, we're having our science fiction poetry or fantasy and horror and all the different varieties that we talk about. So certainly continuing to do that is a great thing. We have kind of started to muse on what our additional volunteer roles that we might want to include. So depending on, if we wanted to have someone that kind of has that overhead view of what's going on with conventions, or maybe, if there is someone's planning a thing, they could let them know, and we could kind of help coordinate internal communication, or, reaching out to other people in the region. Certainly, I'm open to finding additional ways that people want to kind of get involved and help out with that. So, a lot of what we do just kind of boils down to who do we have coming into the leadership positions. So, as we've kind of covered, there's lots of the publications that takes up a lot of the time of us in kind of the board positions, tracking down chairs and facilitating all that. We have FJ has done great work on keeping the website running and doing Starline at the same time and filling in all the other roles. We have John Paul now, who's going to be taking on the Starline editorship. So that's great to be kind of helping spread the load off of FJ a bit. So certainly different volunteer roles are something that we're open to seeing how they might work out, and kind of considering where we want to put our efforts and expand.
I'd really like to feel that there are backups for stuff I do. Brian, our secretary, should be able to handle the website if something happens. I don't think there's anything I'm doing that he can't do. It's pretty, the structure is, I hope, self-evident. But it would be nice to have backup for the print and PDF publication layout. It's a little bit scary to me that Robert Fraser, who's retired long ago from this, is the only person with InDesign skills that has experience doing the layout stuff. So I still hope we can elicit members who might be in a position to step in if I can't do it anymore. It's also nice to have backup with the mailing, which I think we kind of do. I have done mailings before and could do it in a pinch, and Brian Garrison has done mailings before and could maybe do it in a pinch at gunpoint. The mailing is a lot of work as well, but I'm so glad we've got Andrew.
Yeah, and certainly when I had kind of stepped away from the mailing in the past, 20 years, I've had more than 20 addresses, which I think our president, Brian Tawara, has beat me out on that, because, how do you count his addresses? But certainly things might be a little more stable. So, that's always one of those things is, I might have a little bit more capacity for those sorts of things now. But yeah, in terms of as volunteers come and go, we understand that there's, the ebb and flow of timing and ability to help out. But we have our president, so welcome, Brian. We were just talking about, other volunteer positions and things, but do you want to give a hello to the general membership here?
Well, again, thank you everyone for coming back to join us for our first town hall meeting here and testing out the Zoom thing. Can you all hear me? I'm just making sure here, because okay, 5 by 5, excellent. And so anyway, as we walk into the new year here, this is an exciting moment for the SFPA, as we will hopefully discuss throughout the course of this. But I think we are really on the verge of some amazing changes and transformation for the organization. I'm so happy we've got so many wonderful officers who are making this a great organization, as we are getting close to probably the largest membership that we've had since our formation in 1978. And so, this is part of our hope to have this big conversation then about well, now that we're here, where do we go? And how do we build and develop the leadership capacity and even the organizational capacity, both within the US and of course for all of our members around the world here, because this is a very big process and we have some big things to announce. Right? And so, leaving at that, and it's like, well, let's go into the rest of it. Also, our big thanks to Jean-Paul Garnier, who's doing so much work here and taking on and about to fill in some very big shoes with taking on the editorship of the Starline publication. And if I seem a little bit apprehensive right now, it's because I'm always worried with a Zoom meeting, it becomes something like that old TV show Get Smart with the cone of silence then, and all sorts of technical malfunctions are what I'm used to with this. So, all right, well, let's take it away.
Yeah, so in terms of continuing on with terms in the volunteer positions and those sorts of things, maybe a convention coordinator. Colleen, I think, was wanting to add something about conventions and the way that we're working with those.
Yeah, when I was on the SF Canada board, Canada, while geographically bigger than the US, is much smaller when it comes to population. So there's the same challenge of having a lot of places that can have conventions, and it's not economically possible for small organizations to have unending resources. But we did find that if volunteer members wanted to have a table of members' books at a convention, that they would approach us, send us the information, and if we could, as long as our budget sustained it, we would pay for the table, but it was up to the person who was taking it on to put the table together. In some cases, members could drop off books to the person who was organizing the table, and they would coordinate volunteers to man the table. And the SF Canada took no money for it. All the money went back to the members if any of their books sold. We did, so in that case, it would be a different person at every convention, because somebody in Ontario or somebody in BC, we're not necessarily going to be traveling to all the conventions, and that worked quite well. Yeah, so members, some would say ship the books to me, some would say ship it to the hotel, which is always a possibility. Now, of course, we're talking about when we have conventions in person again. We also had a banner, and I don't know how well that worked, because somebody would have to ship it to someone else. So it's possible that if SFPA had a banner, we could also look at whether we could afford to do the shipping for such a, from one convention to the next. We also did a few parties. So 1 year in Calgary, I think it was World Fantasy Con was in Calgary. And so I was the party coordinator. Again, I had to look up and get volunteers together. SF Canada put money towards food and alcohol, and they paid for the hotel room for that. I think we had pins and stickers as well, like little Canadian flags, because it's like, yay, Canada. But there are different ways to do that. And I'd say if members want to send a proposal to us, we can always look at that. And if our budget can sustain it, we can always put money towards that. But I think it's a case-by-case basis, because I don't know how many conventions there are throughout Canada and the US, or there's little ones that happen, and then there, of course, they're the big ones that happen as well.
Yeah, personally, I haven't been to a lot of conventions, and I know, like you were saying, there's the geographic dispersal. Like, we've got people around the world, so as much as I'd love to go to a convention in Singapore, just it's the bank doesn't support doing that regularly. But yeah, in terms of kind of the mailing, I wonder if there's some way in the near future that there'd be a good way of having a tablet or something that shows the member books. And I know Jean-Paul was showing some stuff about trying to coordinate, hey, here's a way that we can have a page that includes like a purchasable link to member books. So we've kind of got the members, or the books page on the website that has been going in kind of a low key format for a long time, but there are some options that we could plug that into an actual point of sale thing, or what is it through like IndieBound or something, Jean-Paul?
That would be through bookshop.org. So any book that's distributed through Ingram would be available, and we could basically have an SFPA page, which would be an affiliate sales link. So we could raise a little bit of money, but it would be one place to collect all members' books. So one link we can send where there's a place to purchase everyone's books, but it is limited to books distributed through Ingram. So that can be an issue for some books.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that are either, I mean, we do have the self-published books, and there's a lot of small presses as well. So we might have to have like plan A, plan B.
The books page should have every book linked to a site where it can be purchased, but people often aren't good about sending me those links, or for that matter, sending the books at all.
Oh.
So this is a reminder to those of you who have books that aren't on our books page, do send those in.
Can we give Wendy a moment to talk about virtual cons, because she seems to have some experience in that, and she might be able to help us shed some light on how we can do that. Take it away.
Oh, well, thank you, Diane. Yeah, I've been kind of taking the point on this. I've been setting up readings, panel discussions, and I'm coordinating an open mic for poets at Balticon this coming month. So I invite anyone that's interested to come and support us. But anyway, virtual cons are very accessible. People can come from all over the country. The people that are coming in on the panels are all SFPA members. I've been trying to put together panels that are diverse. So we're not just all white men up on the panel or all white women. I'd like to show that we are people of various ages, different, basically different backgrounds. And so far it's been working out pretty well. I have been noticing that before I started this, a lot of the program directors had no idea that anyone was interested in poetry. A lot of them didn't even know it existed. And no, it's true. They really don't. And I've been very frustrated as a poet because of this, because I mean, I went to a Clarion workshop where, oh, hold on a sec. Yeah. Sorry, my cat got in here and I almost got her, but that's anyway. I even went to a Clarion panel, and the editors who were giving the panel on editing speculative poetry were laughing that it didn't really exist. And I don't even know why I'm here. And I'm thinking, gee, this is Clarion West. And this is who they're putting on the panel. They didn't even bother to call SFPA, where obviously there are people that know about the topic and who could talk about it.
There's very little
but I'm working on this. I am working on this. I actually was speaking with the program director who not only is doing Balticon, she also is doing VisCon, which is the WorldCon, as a coordinator. And she was saying that she didn't think people were that interested in poetry, but she was letting me go ahead. And while I was in a training session with her, I just mentioned poetry, and half of the people in the training raised their hands and got excited. And they did this in front of the programming director, which I think is a very good thing. It shows her that there is interest. So I'm hoping we will have enough people come to the Balticon panels and to the open mic just to show that there is more interest in poetry. And I think if we can overcome this perception that we either don't exist or that there's just nobody that's, you know, it's such a small number of people interested. If we can show that there is more interest, I think we can be more visible. And I think it'd be good for all of us as poets who are trying to sell our books, good for readings, good for our membership. And I think getting fan tables out there would be a good start. When you go to a convention physically, it's always good to have a table where you can leave your things or know that you're going to meet people. It does mean that volunteers need to be there, but if you don't have a table where you're selling books, at least have a fan table available at least at smaller cons. And you only need a few people at the con to man the table. I know of, for instance, we have a local science fiction group that always has a table at Lost Con because that's their local con. And I happen to be a member of that too. That's where I met them. But they have a table there, and that's how they get most of the members for their group. And that's physical talking, meeting people. If you did get the bookstore, the virtual one that was discussed earlier, that would be a great thing to have at a fan table because you could show them with like a QR code. They can just zoom right into the bookstore if they're interested. And plus, if they're buying online, the tax situations disappear. I know somebody was talking about doing fan tables, or rather book tables. I used to do that for Broad Universe for years. I was kind of their main table person. And I have to say, when you do a physical table, there are a lot of tax situations. Every state is different. There's possibility for high fees, high penalties if you don't follow the tax laws correctly. And it becomes a really difficult thing to manage. But if you have it online and people can buy online, you bypass a lot of that. So that's just something to consider if you want to set up the Ingram Spark bookstore. But as to virtual cons, I don't know. I'm not sure how much longer they're going to go on. They've been great during the pandemic. I think the first one was NASFIC, which I opened up a reading for. I think we had like 9 members come to that one. And then it followed with Balticon, and Balticon really set the tone of what virtual conventions are going to be for the next year. They kind of created the format. And I just happened, that was my first experience just as like a panelist or whatever. And it's just grown from there. And from Balticon, they're the ones that trained all the crews for the virtual cons that have spread out across the country. So I think Balticon is a key convention for us to target if we start targeting certain ones. Certainly WorldCon is a good one. World Fantasy Con is a good one. Balticon has a good population of speculative poets, whether they're just not open about it, but they are there. They host a speculative poetry contest each year. But there's a lot of ones to target. And I think you need to focus on the bigger conventions and keep it simple and not try to spread out to all the little tiny ones. Certainly, I mean, we all go to smaller cons, but when it's physical, it's hard to get enough people to be able to travel to a small con to really make an impression. But a lot of us do go to WorldCon each year. A lot of us do go to World Fantasy Con each year. So if we could pick key conventions, let the membership know which ones are going to be, I don't know, but we're going to have a presence there. People could coordinate when they're going to be there or not. And we could kind of condense enough that we start making an impression out there. And I think too, with the nonprofit status and all these other things in place, we could become a real force out there on the convention scene. But anyway, I don't mean to rattle on for a long time. If you want a coordinator, I might consider coming on board depending on time constraints. I am a published author. I do a lot of readings. This is kind of what I do for a living, is sell my books. So naturally, I'd like to be out there in the cons with the SFPA behind me, but I also don't want to have so much volunteer stuff that it overwhelms me too. I'm also now an anthology editor. I assume I'm going to be going back next year for that. And eventually I'd like to volunteer to do either a telescope or Starline, you know, whenever there's an opening too. So there's a lot of things that I'd like to get involved in, but I think experience-wise, coordinating conventions and author tables is kind of my ballywick, if you will. I have been a dealer for over 25 years on the convention scene. I know a few things.
Yeah, no.
Wendy, I'd say don't forget about the Stoker Con too, the Horror Writers
Oh.
Association. It's in Colorado this year, I believe, and it's virtual, but it's happening. I think it's happening in the next month.
Yeah, I'm not really a horror writer, so I don't always keep in tracking with StokerCon, but I think if I was doing this role, I think it would be necessary for me to do so. I agree, because a lot of us do write horku or horror theme poetry.
Okay, well, tell you what, why don't I take a quick stab at this here to also talk a little bit about what we have been doing as SFPA in my own work in visiting to a lot of the different conventions, particularly in person and virtually and so on.
Brian?
Because I think, yes.
Can I correct one misapprehension quickly before it goes any further? The Eye to the Telescope editorship changes with every issue. It's online. It's a single theme. There's basically no skill involved other than picking out the poems and replying to submissions. But the Starline editorship is a long-term commitment. It has a really steep learning curve and a lot of responsibilities. And we don't have anything set up where someone can just edit one issue of Starline and that's it. The commitment is supposed to be for 2 to 5 years.
Okay.
Just wanted to make that clear.
Great. So anyway, over the last several years here that I've been going around to a lot of different conventions, both the small ones and the large ones, there is that we've been able to kind of field test our ideal of what it looks like. And I absolutely believe that having a presence at the science fiction conventions, the comic book conventions, and even the regular standard literary conventions is, of course, within our interest then. And the question is how do we do this right? Experience is showing us there that a good convention presence really can be done with as little as one person to probably about a team of 3 to 5 people really optimizes this process. I'm sure, Wendy, you found that out as well. And so the question becomes is, if you can get into the convention and we can push for those panels, then that there's a couple of ways to do it. I don't happen to find that pushing for just one reading helps establish a very effective presence. There's that if we get to the process of going through that trouble to even be at the convention at all, it really does help to try and get programmed so that at least once every day or so, we've got a reason to be there. Someone can wander in and be a part of these readings, for example. But to that extent, it's like I want to say that what has been working and a lot has been the idea of having a good presence there without also making it excessively burdensome for our members who are going in to participate, then if that makes sense. So if we can get a table, then that's really great. But then you also have to have someone who can, a team of people who can commit to being at that table for the better part of a day, or else at least when we have those tables, you can't be having a lot of things where you're always worried like, oh God, someone's going to come along and run off with $200, $300 worth of books here when we're not looking, just because someone had to take a bathroom break or something like that. What we did with, yes, Wendy.
I just want to say that being a dealer for 25 years, when you're behind the table, there's a special community, if you will. Once you're behind the table, we all look out for each other when it comes to theft. So sometimes I've been running tables alone for years. I mean, over 2 decades now. And what I would do is I would just ask my neighbor politely, I'm just going to take a quick bathroom break, and you don't abuse the privilege. Don't be more than 20 minutes. But would you mind watching? And if you keep everything under the table and out of sight from the public, generally your neighbors will watch for you. So even if you only have 1 or 2 people to mind the store, it is doable, especially at a smaller comp. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just thought
no, absolutely. No, that absolutely is a great point here. And so what I'm hoping to do is let's get a blog post up on this real soon here about how, members, whether, it's like, even if you're just going in solo, for example, one person, poet, representing the SFPA or speculative poetry in general at a conference can make a lot of difference just by, making a couple of things available. One, we need sign-up sheets then so that people who are interested in speculative poetry can sign on and we can email them additional information. They need to have takeaway sheets there where, hey, I like this speculative poetry thing here. Let's see, and they can go back and look it up online, then leading it to the SFPA and other speculative poetry sites. And what we found works is to have available a history of the SFPA and a takeaway sheet of the most recent winners, for example, of the Riceland, the Dwarf Stars, the Elgin Awards from, say, in this case, 2020 or 2019, just so people can kind of see that this is this track of things that people can be involved with and engaged in. What we found really works for the programming, though, is to try and consider doing things like you want to be able to do readings, you want to be able to do focused conversations too. And like, okay, let's talk about, it's like, if you're going to a horror convention, for example, then, all right, yes, we can talk about what is the legacy or the influence of H.P. Lovecraft, of Edgar Allan Poe, or who are some other poets who write in horror that we may not have considered, like Linda D. Addison or many of the others there. And who also, I think whenever you have people in the room, we want to be encouraging them not just to read who's already been there, but to get them engaged with, you can be a part of this, and that there is a supportive community out there. So if you've ever been in an MFA program, for example, which tells you, oh, serious writers don't write speculative literature. But no, it's like, come with us. We will show to you exactly how much difference speculative literature really does for everyone. Then. But I think what we're moving towards, and we've always been having this conversation within the officer corps and with many of our other volunteers, is also possibly opening it up to the idea of how do we create, within from an organization perspective, the opportunity for sanctioned readings and sanctioned representation there. How do we make it easier for you to feel confident saying you are representing the SFPA then? Because what we would see ultimately then would be, things like, can the SFPA offer, people who are organized and a presence at conferences, for example, like we can't cover your membership fees, for example, but we can offer, like, all right, if you're doing a poetry slam, we can give you, PDF memberships, for example, to represent to anyone who wins the poetry slam. We can give you, a PDF membership to, that's like to someone who, they're really interested. Okay, it's like if you're that interested, then maybe we can let you try it out for a year with us. Then, just as a, like, what is it that they always say? It's like, the first one is always free. Like, okay, all right, we'll lead you into this process here and try it for a little while. But all right, I've got a little puppet going on here, apparently breaking the room. So, all right, let me cede the table to some other people who want to make some remarks.
I'd be a little cautious about widely offering PDF memberships. Of course, it doesn't cost us anything. It's just a little bit more, bookkeeping to enter the names in the roster and then take them out when they don't actually join. But Brian, I will say you've given out a lot of PDF memberships over the years, and almost no one has ever subsequently joined the organization. So I think we should restrict it to people who are really interested and who are unable to afford the $15.
Yeah, so in terms of certainly increasing our con presence and kind of thinking about some ideas within that, I know people have been going to a lot of things and doing things for years. And Wendy, it sounds like you've basically been the SFPA con coordinator without having the title. So, you've been putting in a lot of that groundwork, and I think one of the things that we as the official group can do is try to draw that out and really raise up, give a little more appreciation for a lot of that, all the hard work that people are putting in to kind of build these connections and go from the ground up. And definitely, there's that strategic tact that you're taking in terms of saying, well, there's the big name conferences that, I mean, yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but in terms of really increasing our profile, having some amount of connection there and building up there is one way to really start expanding and allow us to kind of come out of the woodwork and finding more of our people. So
if I could interject,
yep,
Ryan,
go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sometimes I do that. I get so excited. But I would say that if there is a group of our membership that are closer to a small con, if they knew about each other and could talk about it, they could put together at least a fan table and maybe approach programming to do at least a group reading for SFPA representing us. And I think Colleen, or I forget who mentioned it, they said smaller cons are often more open to poetry. And I agree with that. I went to a small con. I just applied for programming and I didn't actually set up all their programming, but they had a great mini poetry track. And Akua and I both just happened to be sucked into that. And it was a wonderful experience. But it was because they already had a couple of poets in-house, and so they knew they could build that up. But we need a system so that our membership can get an idea of where we could be, and that so they can plan ahead and to either attend, or if it's virtual, that they just know to put it in their schedule and that kind of thing. Right now, we just don't have a system. There's just no way to know.
No, and thank you, Wendy, for bringing that up. That has been one of the projects that I've really wanted to do is, I ask everybody when they join if I can share their contact details with other members, and virtually everyone says yes. And my plan has always been to group people by region and put them in touch with one another. I just haven't had the time. But now that Jordan, who has thankfully saved my life with with taking over the bulk of the MailChimp duties, I do now have some more time. And once I have moved house, I will in fact do that. So thank you very much for mentioning that. I'm going to do it. It's on my to-do list.
Yeah, and I know there was some movement, maybe even 2 years ago now at this point, but or more, to kind of start some connections of like regionally, because I know I had received a batch of emails of folks here in the Northwest, and we kind of started a groups.io that we had a few hellos and then, haven't really said much since. I think as we start to build that infrastructure and try what are the different avenues, it's kind of about finding that tipping point where, okay, now we have enough people and we know of enough people, and that work of going to the conventions and getting the tables and building those connections, like we continue to grow, but still, a couple hundred people spread out around the globe, it's about getting those closer connections so that we can start having, coffee hours or things like that. So
Yeah.
Well, I
and
know that.
I think
I'm sorry.
Juan Perez was waiting for a little while here to add something, and then maybe we can jump over to you, Deb.
Right now is that this is what usually happens.
You're pretty quiet there.
Can you hear me?
A little bit, maybe leaning
Get
closer to the
the
mic.
mic. Yeah.
Hold on just a second. Maybe it's my computer here.
That's a little better.
That's better. Just lean forward.
All right. I'm trying not to because I'm a little bit oversized. But anyways, I've had several panels here in Texas, South Texas, and also there in Austin with the Armadillo Con. And I usually the one that asks for a panel for poets to read, and I wind up being the host. But the question I always had was the title itself of it being, let's say, for example, Science Fiction Poetry Association's Texas edition or whatever. Reading usually is just speculative poetry, and people asking about the question about the word itself. But so what you're saying now is that we can officially use that title with our panel without, I mean, usually what happens is most of the poets that sit in that panel have either one or two poems, either in the star line or either the telescope or something like that. So what you're saying right now that we can, because I'm about to ask for the new panel because the convention is in August, but it's going to be virtual, right? So you're saying I can use that title, and actually I thought about it when you guys were talking about it, to use that title as the Texas edition of Science Fiction Poetry Association, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I think it's might be a matter of kind of, I heard the term case by case. So in terms of just kind of making sure that you've got that permission, kind of reaching out saying, hey, we're planning to do this convention.
That's what I'm asking.
Can we say that it's, produced by the SFPA? So, we do want to not have, randos popping up or, here by way of some third party like, oh, well, the SFPA had this thing, and then be a little bit blindsided. And, maybe we'd find out that it was, someone who's been doing it for a while, but just in terms of kind of keeping track of that, giving us the heads up and letting us be able to be like, okay, yeah, we'll condone this, we'll sanction it. If we do wind up having enough money to print lots of big banners, we could.
The money. That's not what I'm asking.
Right.
Title. So
Yeah.
I know that's an issue with the money, and I'm not going to bother with that. But I'm just saying using the title, because usually all the poets that I have sitting in, and we're all talking Texas poets, mainly Texas poets. They'll start talking about the star line. They'll start talking about the Iris telescope, and the Horizon Award and all that other stuff. But I just thought, wouldn't it be great to just use it, and that way we can, because it's usually one poetry panel, and I'm usually the host in like the Armadillo Con or the People's Poetry Fest down here in Corpus Christi where I'm at, things like that. So I was just
Well,
wondering.
we can always help plug it. If you say it's by the sponsored or whatever by the SFPA, we will help.
Who's the email
put up the
go
word.
to? Who's the email go to? That's for official permission.
Well, that we have. I mean, assuming Wendy is going to take over coordinator, but we have to hash that out. We're not there yet, but we will in the next couple of months, probably, or sooner. Who knows? Put out information for people that and how they can get in touch.
Yeah.
Debbie?
What I was going to say, it's been a while since I've organized an event for a con, just due to health reasons and all sorts of stuff, why I haven't been able to do it lately. But the ones that were the most successful seem to be the ones that had a theme beyond what is speculative poetry, because it seems like every time you want to do a panel for a con, they want you to have what is speculative poetry. And so the ones that I used to do at Condor, which is a very, very small little con, we used to do a workshop. We would actually do a poetry workshop where we would come up with a writing assignment. We give examples, and those were really fun and fairly well attended. And then we would have a reading after, so they would do it back to back. There was a WorldCon one I did on the universe in 3 lines, where it was a sci-fi coup thing, where I was the sci-fi coup poet. We had a landscape architect who wrote haiku to imagine her landscapes she later built, and we had another novelist who used haiku in her novels. And we ended up having this amazing discussion about how you could use haiku to create a theme and then write fiction from the theme by trying to visualize your landscape by walking around it and writing little poems about it. So that was a really interesting, and it got a lot of people in it. So, and a lot of discussion. But I've been to a lot of these where you go to, especially, oh gosh, I can't think of the one, Wendy, the one that's at the airport every year at Thanksgiving, and I never could go to it. Whatever.
LostCon.
Yeah, LostCon always wants us to do a what is speculative poetry panel, if we do a poetry panel at all. And that just doesn't draw people.
Well, I know LostCon, Denise actually has taken the point there, and she's been successful at getting a poetry panel for the well, when we were the time before, so to speak.
Right.
She had done it for a few years. And they also know me and they know I'm a poet. So, but the thing is, we haven't had a lot of people showing up in the audience yet. And we're still so under the radar there that it's just hasn't been, it
Right.
just hasn't consulted enough. I mean, Lost Con is kind of, I consider my home con. So I will be there and in person this year. I will put forth something, or I'll support Denise if she decides to go ahead and do her panel, one way or the other. But this is just another case of poetry not being thought of as anything important or present. It's like off in the nether regions, which it really isn't. We do have a sizable community, and
Right.
just nobody knows who we are.
Well, that's why I was just wondering about titles, because that one panel I did on the universe of three lines, that one got a lot of people, but I wonder if it was the title. I don't know why that one got people. The poetry workshops.
It might have
Pardon
been.
me?
It might have been too artsy for the geeks. That sounds like something that would fit really well at a literary event. I mean, a very beautiful sounding title, but for the geeks, they're very down to earth. And I do very simple.
But I got a lot of people at that one.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good.
And
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
We had a large turnout at Diversicon for the Riesling Award reading, and you know, we could feature award winners, Riesling, Dwarf Stars, Elgin, the contest winners at any convention, and we could even have, you know, people who are past winners read. And
well, I did
word it in such a way that it's not just those award winners, but that if it's implied that award winners are featured, I think that might draw a little bit more interest.
Yeah,
Also, Con, I mean, that is a larger convention, but they do masterclass workshops. People pay extra for this above their membership. And I went to the one in Minnesota. Linda Addison did a poetry workshop, and there was a waiting list to actually pay to get into that. And it was very good. So, you know, Linda Addison's an award-winning, she's won the Stoker several times for poetry. You know, she's won various awards. So that name drew people. And then afterwards, there was a poetry reading, which we did just in like one of the convention rooms. And again, it was packed. And, you know, most of the people who were there were also reading. But there are different ways of doing it, and sometimes presenting to the convention, maybe a workshop, and where there are some larger, bigger name poets or award winners, that's another way to draw people in, introduce them to poetry, let them try writing it, and guiding them.
Well, let me interject here, Van, and show you one of our case models here of what I think is an example of what, as the president of the SFPA, always, and I hope it has always been clear that I encourage you, above all, to have fun and to challenge yourselves as we're representing ourselves at these conventions and these opportunities to experiment and explore all the possibilities of speculative poetry. In 2017, I coordinated with what I guess we would consider informally the Texas chapter of the SFPA, where we had about 4 or 5 of our members who were all going to Comicpalooza in Houston, Texas. And this was a first for me as well, to be able to go to that. And frankly, Comicpalooza is this incredibly huge and almost intimidating science fiction, fantasy, and horror convention, where I was fascinated in Texas because at one of the exhibits they had there was the guns of Doctor Who, where all of the people there were just outlining the whole history of, when you consider Doctor Who, what do the guns look like? But anyway, it's like what we did as part of our fun approach there was we had the, speculative poetry death match then, where we basically had the speculative poetry Thunderdome then, where we had several of our poets up on table, And it was something very new for all of us ourselves here, where we just basically interacted with the audience and we let the audience choose what were the topics we were going to work with. So we would say, all right, for the left side here, what is the, it's like, give us something to write about. And they would say something like, nuns with guns. Okay. On the right side, you give us another topic, and they said steampunk. And so then it's like, all right, fine. We now have 5 minutes each, and every one of us has to write a poem involving, apparently now, nuns with guns and steampunk or whatever. Then. And what made it a particular challenge and for all of us was that in doing it, of course, is that only one poem was going to survive and everyone else had to rip up the poem that they resulted with if the audience, by vote and participation, decided that that's not the winner. And so that's rough. It's like people go, no, I just wrote a poem in 5 minutes here and now I have to, it's like, I know. It's like that's the hardcore rules. But it was a really different experience. And so as poets, that was something new for us, but it was also something very new for the audience. And it showed us what a poetry experience can be like. And that's what I would encourage for all of us as we're doing these kinds of activities, is to design something where, you're not likely to see something like that again. Like in the years since, the Texas chapter has continued to kind of build upon and modify the experience. So if you go over to Comic Palooza, you'll see something like not exactly as extreme as what we did in 2017, but that's the joy of it.
We tried that same model, by the way. 2 of those same poets that were at Comic Palooza, 2 of those same poets at Comic Palooza actually were at Armadillo Con, and we tried that same thing in Austin. And yes, you're right, it is quite different. There was the only people that were new were two different poets. There was a total of 4 poets in Austin. We did exactly the same thing, and it was a lot of fun. So,
yeah, well, so I want to jump in here and say, we are kind of at the tail end of what our planned time was. So, one of the objects here of the town hall is to be receptive to hearing what members are interested in and concerned about. Kind of being able to receive that and kind of share some of our thought processes as we try to bring the SFPA ahead into what's next. So, you can reach out to us. There's the SFPA exec at Google Groups that I linked there in the chat. I can link it again here. So that's one area to reach out with kind of a broad range of ideas. And, we might not be able to catch everything, but certainly as we start to find, well, what are kind of some of the additional positions that we might need, such as a con coordinator, right? It sounds like there's tons of interest in terms of finding that ability to kind of meet up in person and arranging those sorts of things. So if you need to run away, certainly that's fine. I don't know that we'll plan to go too much longer here with the town hall, but it's been great to see lots of people and lots of discussion going on. So do keep in touch, and there is that SFPA exec email that you can reach out to us on anything. So unless we have other thoughts or concerns, if Brian, I can give you the floor again then to give us our final goodbyes and hoorays and huzzahs.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
This is Alan Michaels.
Okay.
Hi, I've been just really engaged listening to this this whole meeting today, because I've been a member since about 2008, and I've submitted and had a few things published, and actually won 3rd place, 4th in 2019. But I'm also the program and marketing officer for the Rochester Speculative Literature Association. And I just want to say that listening to everybody here, and again, I apologize for not being live on video, but I've had throat surgery and I'm not in the best of shape right now to be visible. And I'm hoping my voice holds out. But I wanted to say that you're going through everything that every other group goes through. Not a one thing I've heard that has been not a challenge. We're a 501c3 as well. And I've been with them for now 12 years. And we've been ushering a variety of local, regional Rochester speculative fiction and fantasy horror writers and poets. And I want to let you know that we have Astronomicon that's coming up in October, which is a local regional con. And I'd like to get SFPA information out, whether it's a spot on our own table, because we have a presence at the con. And I also work with Rochester fantasy fans. So I've got a number of different outlets that I can tap into. So, sorry, again, my voice is not the best shape. But the idea here is it going through the SFPA exec email is the best way just to start filtering some information? Or is there someone else that I should get out information to so that we can coordinate later in the year?
Yes, so I think right now the SFPA exec will be kind of the best way to get to us, since we haven't necessarily appointed anyone to take on kind of con stuff as our official representative. So yeah, definitely reach out there.
All right, perfect. You guys are doing a great job. I know there's a lot of work involved here. We publish anthologies. We do monthly meetings with you know, a fairly small but sizable group of people, and it's always a challenge. And as the program officer, I know how challenging that is to herd squirrels like we are doing here too. So everyone should just give themselves a hand on what you all have accomplished over the years and continue to work with. I know it's a challenge, and I really respect that. It's one of the reasons I've stayed a member.
Well, thank you, Alan. I really appreciate you. It's like you hanging in there, and again, for all of our members for being a part of this process. And so, look, I think the big thing that I hope that we have been modeling is the idea that at the end of the day, we are a community. There are real people, real people who are taking a lot of time out of their schedules to be a part of this, and managing to navigate through a wide variety of circumstances, health, professional issues, getting through school, and so on there. And as the SFPA, I hope you all realize we do see you and we do appreciate what you're doing and what you're giving into this. And hopefully, I would like to think that we're giving something really amazing back. This is something where there are literary societies that have existed all throughout human history, of course. And I think every generation finds its own different way of building that community and keeping in touch and challenging ourselves as to what's possible and where we can go. And I think the question I've had with some of our younger emerging members even is just, what is the greatest ambition that we can have as a collective organization of speculative poets in the world? What's the greatest good that we can do? And it's like, what would happen, for example, if we had an entire planet full of speculative poets? As ambitious as that amazingly sounds, what does that look like? And what are the first steps that we take even now and today to build that out? And I think going ahead and just kind of bringing this to a close, I think one of the things I do want to get on everyone's radar here is the idea that it is very important to me, and I know to all the other officers as well, of how do we start building up our leadership capacity then? Is that as much as we have all loved being a part of the SFPA and being in different positions here, eventually, we're not going to last forever. And so the question is how do we show one another, emerging members, long-time members, how to be a part of the SFPA and to build up those skills that are helpful as leaders, as community builders, to take on the different responsibilities then. Where will our next treasurers come from? Where will our next secretaries and vice presidents and presidents come from then, so that we have this pool then, and so that we almost seem like any one of us could step up to the plate here and know that the other members have each other's backs. That's the community we would want, to build out there. That, if I suddenly get disappeared here, or Vince winds up getting kidnapped by aliens on his trip to Roswell, for example, that the SFPA will go on. We'll try to get Vince back from the aliens in Roswell, but still, it's like in the meantime, the things go on. And that's the amazing thing that we want to do. Like FJ has done so many amazing things in the time here, taking on so many different roles here. And FJ is absolutely irreplaceable in many ways, but at the same time, before we go
replaceable. That's my whole point. I need to be replaceable. And it kind of scares me that.
Exactly. So anyway, so those are the things that I just, it's in, this is an perfect way of expressing it all, I know, but I know that over time, we're going to come up with even better ways to improve our operations, our ways of connecting with one another. And now more than ever, especially as we move closer towards nonprofit incorporation and the final approval of all of that, it's like, this is the thing where it's like, it's the beginning of a new chapter for us here of how do we keep each other transparent, accountable, and enthusiastic as well, because admittedly, it's like, when Richard and I looked at the at all the reporting requirements that are going to come up ahead here, we're just going like, oh wow! It's like, who's prepared to help us with that process, Ben? And so, but other organizations have done this for decades already here, so it's a little bit of a learning curve. But I have no doubt that between the rocket scientists, the slam poets, the teachers, the it's like, we have the experience, we have the technology, we can do this, we can rise up to the occasion, and I thank you for being a part of that journey.
All right, so of course we've got our Elgins. You can continue to nominate for that. We've got the Reislings, right? Got to read through that and vote on those. And I think we've still got a few hours left for Dwarf Stars if you find any short ones to pass along to Charles Christian there. So exciting things are going on, and thanks for making it out. Hopefully we'll do another town hall. It might be another year. We'll see. Keep in touch, email us. Have a great until we see you again.